Alright, so bear with me here. For old time's sake, I want to take a break from the single stories this week and just do some various short stories people have been sending me. Don't worry, because the longer stories will be back next week. For now, buckle up for some ghosts of Gettysburg, werewolves in the Ozarks, and that thing that's been eating someone's cows. This is Unexplained Encounters. Be sure to follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app, and send me your scary stories at darkstories.org. You can also find more scary stories narrated by me on my other show, Tales from the Break Room, also on your favorite podcast app. Now, let's begin. Warning: the following story contains depictions of violence against pets and animals. A werewolf ate my friend's dog. From Netherwolf. I'm submitting this for a close friend who wants to remain anonymous. That being said, I've known him for a long time, and he's not the attention-seeking sort. He wrote this story down and asked me to submit it to the show. These are his words. My story takes place where I've hunted all my life. I won't give away the exact location, because it's on private property, and I doubt the actual owner, who I've known since I was a kid, would appreciate that. What I will tell you is that it is a heavily forested stretch of about 200 acres in the foothills of the Ozarks. Near the northern edge of the property, the forest gives way to a large glade, where whitetails often forage in the early mornings of the fall hunting season. That day I made my way down the gravel roads to the pull-off closest to the glade. Beside me, Brutus sat on the passenger seat, his huge blocky head lying lazily on the center console. Brutus was easily the best dog I ever had. I still don't know what breed he was. I found him at a rescue shelter a few weeks after I was discharged from the Marines. I knew the moment I saw him he was exactly what I needed to readjust to civilian life. I also knew from the size of his paws that he was going to be enormous, which was fine by me. I've never been too keen on little yappy dogs. I needed a man's dog, the kind who would be my ride or die, the kind who had my same warrior spirit. We bonded almost immediately. I wasn't wrong about Brutus being enormous either. By the time he was a year old, he stood nearly 3 feet at the shoulder, weighing almost 200 pounds. My best guess? He was either a Rottweiler or Mastiff of some kind, crossed with a Great Dane. His massive head almost more resembled a bear than a dog, and every inch of him was solid, lean muscle. His coat was short and dense, but his color was brindle, rather than the iconic black and brown of a Rottie. When we got to the pull-off, I retrieved my rifle from the cab of the truck, slinging it over my back. It was a Sigmauer M400, which my brother had given me for Christmas the year before. I'd taken it to the range a few times, enough to know how it behaved, but I hadn't had the opportunity to hunt with it yet. Honestly, apart from the selector switch, it wasn't that different from the M271 used overseas. I had 2 sights mounted on the rifle. A red dot sat on a 45-degree offset for close work. For longer shots, I ran a top-mounted mid-range optic with a night vision option. It wasn't highly magnified, but from where I planned to set up, it would do the job. I also brought my sidearm, a 9mm Glock 19. Obviously, I didn't plan to shoot a deer with it, but in Arkansas, concealed carry is easy, and I never go anywhere without it. The smell out there brought me back to my childhood. You know the smell if you spend any time outdoors? That earthy, slightly damp smell of earth and fallen leaves, and the faint, sweet scent of pine sap. That, combined with the smell of gasoline exhaust from the four-wheeler I'd brought on a trailer, was more appealing to me than any perfume or cologne. I prefer to hunt in the early morning, but that was a Sunday, and to me, worship is more important. By the time I got to my stand, it was about 90 minutes before sundown. It only gave me about an hour for deer, but I intended to be there well into the night. The same glade we have baited for deer is also frequented by coyotes in search of bedded down fawns, and coyotes are not something you want in an area you want to hunt deer in. In Arkansas, coyotes are considered a nuisance species, which means anyone with a license can get a permit to hunt them year-round with no bag limit. I dismounted the four-wheeler and unlocked the ladder guard. Brutus jumped down too, circling the tree looking for a place to leave his mark. He was such a good dog. The moment I called him and told him to stay, he laid himself at the base of the tree, his big ol' head over one paw, content to just be with me. The reason the stand had a ladder guard was because this particular stand was permanent. It was set on an ancient oak, the kind with big, gnarly roots shooting out in all directions, and so big around that 5 men could not wrap their arms around it at the base. It towered up over the smaller trees to give a perfect view of the glade. That ladder had been permanently secured to the massive trunk and climbed up about 40 feet to the stand that was fixed in the fork of the trunk and a branch twice as thick as my torso. The ladder guard was to make sure that, on the off chance someone else found our little honey hole, they wouldn't have access to the best vantage point. There wasn't even a whisper of a breeze, and as I sat there in the quiet, I was tempted to just close my eyes and sleep. If you're a hunter, you know, there's nothing more peaceful than sitting in a stand, listening to the orchestra of the forest, with no one else around to disturb you. I kept a watchful eye on the glade, scanning with my binoculars for any movement. Most of the time in the evening, deer are more cautious and will often wait just at the edge of a glade before eventually and slowly making their way in to graze. I didn't see anything for a while, apart from the random squirrel and one particularly fat raccoon. But then I noticed high above the glade, 2 vultures circling as they often do over a kill. Before long they swooped down and landed, feeding on what I could only assume was a carcass of some kind, which I could not see through the tall grass. I watched as the moon, which was nearly full, began to illuminate the otherwise pitch darkness. Before long, a thick, hazy fog began to gather over the ground. For several hours, everything was peaceful and still. Then, I heard it. The hills erupted with the yowls and yips of coyotes. It echoed through the trees, and I thought it was likely only a few of them. To the untrained ear, it can sound like a lot more than that. I scanned the tree line beyond the glade, sure that at any moment, one of those murderous canines would come trotting out, following the scent of whatever carrion the vultures had left behind. The yipping faded away, and for a moment, the night was silent once again, until another sound came riding on the still air. This time, though, it was not the high-pitched communicatory calls of coyotes. It was a desperate yelping. It was the sound a canine makes when it is panicked or in pain. It rang out as if crying and pleading, and then was abruptly cut off. Every hair on my body began to stand on end from the top of my head all the way down to my feet. It was a familiar but unwanted sensation, one that I had not personally felt in years. It was an instinct born of bullets whizzing overhead and IEDs exploding in ditches. The sensation of mortal danger. And it was close. As if on cue, I heard Brutus, who had perked up and now stood facing the glade. His deep, rumbling growl told me he felt it too. I looked down to where Brutus was standing like a statue, tall and menacing, and his hackle stood like a lion's mane around his back and shoulders. He was snarling, staring off through the trees at something I did not yet see. I shushed him. At first he ignored me, which was not like him at all. But when I snapped my fingers, he seemed to come back to himself. I shushed him again, and he lay down where he was, but not as if to sleep. That dog was alert, ready to jump into action at any moment. I brought my attention back to the binoculars, which had a night vision feature, and what I saw made my heart begin to race. This was no coyote loping out into the glade. It was far too big, even to be a wolf, even if we had wolves in Arkansas, which we don't. This thing was far bigger than even the largest of gray wolves, though the shape of its head, its pointed ears and long snout, its dark and shaggy fur, all seemed more wolf-like than wild dog. Were it not for its long, lanky limbs and graceful lope, I might have guessed it was a bear. There are plenty of black bear in the Ozarks. But whatever this was, its gait was far too smooth to be the lumbering shuffle of a bear. I watched as it approached the place where the vultures had fed. If there was any doubt in my mind that this thing was not a natural creature, all doubt was erased when it stood upright like a man and let out a howl unlike anything I'd ever heard before or since. At first, it was like a wolf, a long, drawn-out bay that raised in pitch. But it didn't stop there. It continued to get higher and higher until it sounded almost like a bull elk. It was then that I dropped the binoculars and picked up my rifle. Through the scope, I watched as the beast dropped back to the ground, not on all fours, but into a position similar to someone in a full squat. I watched it pick up something and raise it to its mouth with what I could clearly see were eerily human-like hands. I did not intend to shoot at it. I was desperately hoping it would get bored and wander off, back into the woods. Of course, that's not what happened. All at once, a gentle breeze began to blow against my back and down toward the creature. I stiffened when it snapped its head up, lifting its nose to the wind for a moment, then turned to look at me. I had no doubt that it saw me. It dropped whatever it was chewing, never looking away from me. It stood and turned and took a single step in my direction before I finally pulled the trigger. The shot was true. I know it was true. When you've hunted as many animals as I have, you know what a kill shot looks like. Its chest rippled slightly a split second before a fine spray of blood, bright and glowing in the thermal night vision, exploded from its back, and it dropped like a sack of grain. That's another way to know it's a kill shot. Ask any hunter and they'll tell you. There's no greater relief than when the animal they shoot immediately drops where it was standing, because it means they won't have to chase it down. I slid down the ladder, jumping on the ATV. I whistled at Brutus to jump on the back, and we took off to find out what the creature really was. It was even more terrifying up close. Illuminated by the headlights of the four-wheeler, it was clearer than ever that what I was looking at, and I still can't believe I'm writing this, was some kind of werewolf-like or dogman or whatever other name you want to call it. I had just stepped off the vehicle when the thing moved. It was just a twitch at first, the kind of hypnic jerk that people have when they dream they're falling. Before I had time to bring my rifle around, it had rolled back to all fours and turned to face me, snarling and emitting a growl so loud and deep and resonant that I felt it reverberating in my chest. That's when I noticed its eyes. They were bright green, but they weren't like a dog's eyes. They were smarter, brighter, more intelligent. There was an awareness there that I've only ever seen in the eyes of another human being. What happened next only took a split second, but it seemed at the moment to unfold in slow motion. Its muscles tensed. It was getting ready to lunge at me. I let my rifle fall on its sling and held out my left hand out of instinct, preparing to brace the impact and give myself a little room to shoot as I reached for the Glock 19 holstered in my belt. I was too slow. It was in the air before my hand even reached the pistol grip. Its teeth were bared, its mouth was open, ready to tear into me. I was sure it was going to rip my arm clean off before I had a chance to shoot. But it never got to me. There was a blur in my peripheral vision, just as Brutus slammed into the creature's side hard enough to cause it to roll sideways. It was back on its feet in the blink of an eye, Brutus standing between us. Despite Brutus's massive size for a dog, he was still dwarfed by this creature. He lunged at it the same moment I pulled my Glock and leveled the sights over the monster's chest. I still see what happened next in my nightmares. The creature caught Brutus by the throat with one hand and chomped down hard on the back of his neck. It shook violently, and Brutus was then sent rolling away, yelping and crying. I emptied the entire 15-round capacity into the creature's chest. It stumbled back briefly, each impact causing it to twitch for a moment, but it never fell. I pulled the trigger until it clicked empty, and still it continued to come towards me. I've been shot at before. I've seen a Humvee blown apart by a roadside bomb right in front of me. I've had to take cover when enemy RPGs exploded around my position, but I have never been more afraid than I was in that moment. 15 9mm bullets should have been enough to kill just about anything, but it just kept coming. Its muscles tensed again, and I could tell it was about to charge. But just before it did, Brutus latched himself onto the back of the wolf's leg, pulling for all he was worth. It was just enough to pull it back to all fours, giving me a chance to bring up my rifle. I fired over and over until the magazine was empty, but I might as well have been shooting a ballistic dummy. It turned its attention back to Brutus, who was still pulling and thrashing his head side to side with everything he had. With a single swipe of its paw, it hit Brutus so hard that he had to let go. I had another magazine for my rifle in the rucksack that was secured to the front rack of the ATV. I ran for it as Brutus and that dogman werewolf thing circled each other, growling and snarling. I dropped the empty magazine and slammed the full one home, working the charging handle with practiced efficiency. I brought it up just in time to see the creature kill my dog. I won't go into great detail here. Honestly, it's too painful. Suffice it to say that Brutus was no longer in one piece, and there was nothing I could have done. In that moment, I had a choice. I could stay and shoot and hope that one of my bullets would put this thing down for good, or I could drive like hell for the stand and hope this thing could not climb. I chose the latter. I don't know if it could have caught me or not. It didn't try, at least not right away. I drove away throttle wide open, trying not to think about the fact it was eating my best friend. When I reached the stand, I climbed as fast as I could, only stopping to make sure the ladder gate closed as much as possible. Obviously, it wasn't designed to be locked from the top, but it was better than leaving it wide open. When I got back into the stand, I picked up my binoculars and followed the tire trail through the tall grass to where the creature was the last time I saw it. But it was not there. I scanned the glade again, but I could not see any movement other than the tall grass swaying in the gentle breeze. I smelled it before I saw it. That coppery metallic scent of blood registered in my nose only moments before the growling registered in my ears. I stood trying not to panic and scanned the base of the tree, or at least the side of it that I could see. The tree was so large and the stand was positioned in such a way I could only see a small section of it. It wasn't long before I saw the wolf-like creature again. It was circling the tree, clearly looking for a way to get to me. Once it saw me, it never looked away for very long. The way it assessed the tree was more than just animalistic. It seemed more intelligent than that. It looked from branch to branch as if estimating which branches could hold him and which could not, and whether or not the ones that looked strong enough were reachable. I thought for sure I was safe. This tree had lower branches, but the first one that was thick enough to bear the weight of a man was at least 14 or 15 feet off the ground. No man or wolf could jump that high. But I was wrong. With one motion, it leapt up the trunk, pushing halfway up with its hind paws digging into the bark, and landed on the sturdy branch. He was almost halfway to me already. I knew if I didn't do something, it would only be a matter of time before he figured out a way to get to me. I aimed down at it with my rifle, firing 3 rounds in quick succession. I know one of them hit, because it yipped, but in the darkness I couldn't tell where or how much damage had been done. It couldn't have been much, because the creature didn't even slow down. It leapt again. This time it overestimated how much the target branch could hold. It snapped under its weight, and it plummeted all the way to the ground with a thud. It took a moment to recover, then tried again. But this time I was ready. I waited until it was mid-jump and fired center mass. It was just enough to send it to the ground again. They say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. This creature was decidedly not insane. After the third attempt, which I again thwarted with my rifle, it seemed to reconsider. It circled the tree until it found the ladder. It didn't take long for it to swing the gate open and start to climb. I could have fired at it again, but I knew I only had a handful of bullets left, that once those were gone, I'd be a sitting duck. I had to think quick. I remembered then, I had bear spray in the backpack I'd brought up the tree with me the first time. I know what you're thinking. Why would someone in Arkansas have bear spray? You have to understand, Marines are ingrained from day one with the importance of being ready for anything. The truth is, the last time I'd been to our local sporting goods store, they had one for sale, and I bought it, thinking you never know when you might need it. I pulled the pin and emptied the entire can, covering the wolf thing in the top part of the ladder in a yellow haze of pure capsaicin. It worked better than I could have hoped. It was nearly halfway up the ladder when the bear spray hit it full in the face. For the first time, I heard it truly yelp. It let go of the rails and pushed away with its legs to escape the cloud. It crashed to the ground, yelping and sneezing in that way only dogs do. I guess that was enough. It took only a few moments for it to regain its senses enough to run off into the night. I never saw it again. I sat back in the stand, my head resting against the rough bark. I reloaded my nearly empty magazine with shaking fingers, just in case it came back. But it didn't. Still, I didn't even try to make my way down until the light of dawn crept over the eastern horizon. In case you're wondering, I didn't leave Brutus there in the field. I took him home and gave what was left of him a proper burial. I still have his collar hanging on my rearview mirror. His leash is still where I left it, hanging on the hook by my front door. I don't think I'll ever be able to bring myself to get rid of it. Every time I look in the rearview, I'm reminded of the night I lost my best friend and the seemingly invincible creature who took him from me. I don't share this story to get sympathy, but rather as a warning. If you're going to be in the Ozarks at night, be prepared for anything. If you have a sidearm, bring it. If you don't have bear spray, get some and bring that too. You never know what you might run into. Now I know. There is something in the Ozarks, and if you're not careful, you might end up on the menu. A Night in Gettysburg. From Silver Bullet 54. Anybody who's been to Gettysburg in Pennsylvania has realized if they were there on July 4th, 1863, they would be seeing red splotches everywhere around them, due to the longest single and deadliest multi-day battle in the Civil War. More than 51,000 men ended up killed, wounded, captured, or missing. There was even a civilian killed when a bullet went awry and hit a woman who was baking bread for soldiers, killing her instantly. Nowadays, the area is considered a hotbed for hauntings, as all those lives ended in a split second, and the ghosts either can't or won't move on. I went there on vacation once, and had 3 strange incidents happen. The first happened at the battlefield itself. I'm not sensitive to the paranormal, like some people might claim to be, but the entire time I was there, I kept feeling like I was being followed or even watched. Every time I looked around, anyone else there was either taking pictures or talking. No one even glanced in my direction. Eventually, I walked towards the Devil's Den and Little Round Top. The Devil's Den was an area of nothing but rocks and stones that had been covered with dead and dying soldiers, and Little Round Top was where the Union held off wave after wave of Confederate soldiers. That was what gave the Union their first major victory, spelling the beginning of the end for the South, as that battle started off a steady stream southward deep into the Confederacy. As I was looking around, I saw what looked like 5 people hiking up a small hill into a bunch of trees. I called out to them, but not a single one responded. A few moments later, I saw the same thing. 5 people going up the hill and into the trees. A moment later, it happened again. I now realized it was a residual haunting, likely Union soldiers marching up that hill over and over for eternity. This next one was the most terrifying. I was walking down 123 Carlisle Street, across from the Farnsworth House Inn. I happened to glance at it and saw a man staring at me with his teeth bared. I blinked to make sure it wasn't shadows or a reflection. He was still there, staring at me. I soon saw that he had on an expensive gray uniform and hat. I then remembered stories of an evil soldier haunting that inn. Allegedly, he had holed up there to hide, but when Union soldiers found out, they went all out to kill him. And to this day, all the bullet holes on the wall show that he didn't go down without a fight. People eventually decided to just not go into the inn unless there was a good reason to do so. They say that soldier gives off such feelings of anguish, doubt, and fear that even the bravest explorer can't go to the front door without being scared off. As I stared, his eyes followed me with every step. Eventually, the soldier vanished when the window was about out of sight. That made me stick to the other side of the street. The least scary thing was when I went into a nice and homey eatery. The Dobbin House Tavern, that's what it was called. The building was rumored to be haunted by the kind and friendly ghost of Reverend Andrew Dobbin, the original builder of the place. People say they can feel him sitting at their table as they eat, and one woman even claimed to hear him suggest the gingerbread. Can't confirm or deny, as I wasn't there at the time. As I sat, I did feel a few cold drafts, even though it was May, only around 5 p.m., and the temperature outside that day was close to 80. I also noticed that the candle was flickering a bit without any wind at all, which can happen with ghosts, according to what I've heard. After I'd eaten, I got up to leave and bumped into, well, nothing. I asked out loud for the wall to move and heard a small chuckle as I walked out. So is Gettysburg haunted? I give that question a resounding yes. I simply can't explain away what happened at the battlefield, Farnsworth Inn too, or the tavern. I do plan to go to Gettysburg again. Who knows what will happen next? I at least hope it's really interesting. Some quick notes about the following story. First, be warned, it contains depictions of violence against pets and animals. Second, this is a good example of a fun story that is a terrible fit for unexplained encounters. For me, anyway, this goes beyond the realm of believability. I greatly appreciate the submission, but please label it as a creepypasta if it's clearly a work of fiction. Thank you. I watched my uncle's ranch while he was away. I'm never going back. From Kill M Artist. So, the past few days have been really stressful. My friend suggested that I should write about what happened to me and share it on this page, but I don't know how this is supposed to make me feel better. I guess in a way it could be a warning to others, but I highly doubt anyone would believe this anyway. It all started when I got a call from my Uncle Shag last week. His real name was Chuck, but I've always called him Shag, on account of his shaggy beard ever since I was little. That's not important though. Anyway, his appendix had burst, and he had to go in for surgery to get it removed. He asked me if I could house sit for him, get some work done around his ranch while he was in the hospital. Stuff like feed his livestock, fix the fences, simple things that he would normally do himself. I told him I could, and asked if I could bring my dog Bear, since I had just adopted him, and I didn't have anyone to look after him while I was gone. He said I could, as long as he didn't bother the animals. Now, I had not been to my uncle's ranch in a few years. It was in a desert area in Utah, but I still knew how to get there. So I made sure to pack whatever I would need for a few days there, some movies since there was no Wi-Fi at the ranch, and a couple of snacks for me and dog food for Bear. It was going to be a 2-hour ride, and I had not yet eaten lunch, so I stopped by a fast food drive-thru, ordering myself a veggie patty, diet soda, and a small patty for Bear to eat. On the drive to the ranch, I noticed deer carcasses on the side of the road. At the time, I didn't give it a second thought. I supposed it wasn't too strange to find dead deer out here, but that many at once? I should have known better. A few minutes later, I would drive up to my uncle's ranch. I parked near the house that was farthest from the cattle, so they didn't get spooked and run away. As soon as I opened the door to let Bear out, he sprinted right to the cows. He barked and ran around a few of the cows wanting to play, but some walked away and others just ignored him. After about 2 minutes of trying to make new friends, Bear gave up and went to do his business, marking his territory. I smiled at Bear. I had a feeling he was going to have fun here. I turned my head to see a cow staring at me. The thing was thin. I mean, I could tell it had some meat on its bones, but also that it was becoming emaciated. I looked down to see that it must have been looking at the burger. I was holding it in my hand at the moment. "Whoa, it's a veggie patty, buddy. I'm on your side," I said, jokingly, as I raised it and pointed at it. Suddenly, I heard Bear yelp. I dropped my burger and ran towards him to see what was wrong. He had stepped on a broken piece of cactus. I quickly pulled out the thorns from his paw while he growled each time, but afterwards I was rewarded with licks to my face. I spent the rest of the day doing chores and working around the ranch. I won't bore you with the details of the work, but there was one peculiar thing that happened throughout the day. Bear kept growling at the anemic cow from a distance. He just wouldn't go near the thing. He would even grab my pant legs if I was heading in its direction. It was definitely strange, but I thought the cow was sick, and Bear didn't want either of us to catch whatever it had. Animals are funny like that. They can sense what humans can't. That should have tipped me off that something was wrong. By the time I got dinner ready for Bear and me, the sun was already setting. My uncle left me a note telling me that his neighbor went grocery shopping before I came and left their number in case I needed them. Again, there was no Wi-Fi all the way out here, but there was a landline that I could use. "This is just like what the pioneers used back in the day," I joked to myself, knowing no one was around to laugh. I set Bear's bowl down and made my way to the living room. Uncle Shag didn't have cable, but he did have an old VHS player. As I set my food down on the living room table, I searched for something to watch. I ended up choosing Mel Brooks' Young Frankenstein. When that was finished, I rewound the tape and chose Monty Python and the Holy Grail to watch next. I ended up falling asleep during the movie. I looked at the clock. 12:09, past midnight. I hadn't finished my dinner yet, but decided to just have the leftovers tomorrow. I got up and headed towards the guest room with Bear following me. I changed into a pair of boxers and got into bed. I fell right back to sleep as soon as I got in that bed. I could feel the weight of Bear as he jumped on the bed and lay his body on my legs, using my stomach as a pillow. The last thing I remembered before I gave myself up to the sweet relaxation of sleep was petting Bear's head. I was awakened with the sound of a high-pitched yelp. I quickly got up, and in the process I woke up Bear. No, that's not right. It was more like he was awakened by the same sound. I thought it came from him at first, but a few seconds later, we heard the yelp again. It was longer by a few seconds. Bear began to quietly growl as the yelp slowly went from high-pitched to a lower tone. I looked out the window to see if it was a coyote. One of the chores I had here was to set up bear traps around the perimeter so predators couldn't hurt the livestock. But I didn't see anything. Nothing that suggested that there was something out there. I then left the guest room to see if I'd left the TV on before I'd headed to bed. And sure enough, I had. It was just static now, though. That yelping sound must have been coming from the movie before it ended and became static. I turned off the TV and made a mental note to rewind it in the morning. For the remainder of the night, there was no other disturbance. Bear calmed down as well. I checked the time before going back to sleep. It was 4:44 a.m. Morning arrived with the sound of a rooster making its iconic alarming sound. I got dressed and made breakfast for Bear and I. Scrambled eggs with a side of orange juice and dog food. I stepped out to get started with chores, but was absolutely horrified by what I found. There were mutilated corpses outside of 3 of the cows. They were spread apart in front of the fences, blood from each body colliding into one giant pool, and swarms of flies hovering over the remains. It's hard to talk about the details, but I'll try to be as thorough as I can. Each cow had its stomach ripped open, entrails spilling out like stuffing from a worn-out toy that's been neglected over the years. The thing I noticed next was their throats. They'd all been slit, as if someone had been trying to keep them from making noise. I was sick. The first thing I see in the morning is cow mutilation. I took a few steps and threw up. I ran towards the livestock after that, praying this was the only set of casualties. Luckily it was. The rest of the cows had been huddled together in a sort of protection formation. You see, for some herbivores that have young or sick members in their herd, they form a sort of barrier surrounding them so that predators can't get through to them. I looked around to see if there were any footprints of what had been here, of what had done this. Bear came out of the house at that point. He followed me as I searched for clues, but we ended up finding nothing. No blood trail, no footprints. I looked over again at the herd. I saw that one thin cow from yesterday. It was standing in the same place. If it hadn't been moving its tail every few seconds, I would have thought it was a cardboard cutout. The only difference from yesterday was that its entire snout was missing. I saw something similar a while ago when I was watching this nature documentary about African wildlife. There was a zebra drinking water from a watering hole, when suddenly a crocodile ripped its face off. To my shock, the zebra was still alive, but almost its entire face was missing, leaving nothing more than a gaping hole of exposed skull a few centimeters under its eyes. I thought then how cruel nature can be sometimes, and what was in front of me must have been another example. I went over to approach the poor thing, but Bear once again stopped me. He had jumped in front of me and growled for me to go the other way. It wasn't an aggressive growl, but more like he was warning me of something. I lowered myself and began to rub his head. "It's okay, buddy. I've got to go get something to put that poor thing out of its misery. Then I'll get a shovel to bury the rest of the cattle over there," I told him, still completely confused myself, not knowing who or what had done this. I went back into the house to get my uncle's double-barreled shotgun. It was going to be a messy outcome for that cow, but a quick one at least. Just as I loaded the gun, I heard the sound of Bear snarling like a mad dog. I thought the culprit had come back to finish off the rest of the herd, so I ran out as fast as I could. I came back to Bear barking at nothing, like he just chose a direction and began to bark like a mad dog. I noticed that the snoutless cow was not there anymore. I assumed it had wandered off to die on its own. I felt bad. I was about to end its life quickly, so it wouldn't have to suffer any longer. Just then, I realized something. Did whatever do this come back for that other cow? Is that why Bear is acting like this? I thought to myself, as I looked in the direction Bear was barking at. I put the shotgun away, and I went to get a shovel and some bear traps, which my uncle had in the shed. I was disappointed to see there was only one left in the shed. I thought he had more, but one was better than none. When I came back, I put the bear trap aside. and I started digging graves for the cows, after which I would walk towards the tractor. Now, cows weigh a crap ton, and I had a better chance at marrying a model than pushing one bare-handed into a grave. Bear followed me and jumped into the seat next to me as I drove towards the bodies. The first two took effort to lift, but they were easy to move as I lowered them into the pre-dug graves. However, the last body was lifted without ease compared to the other two. I lowered it back to the ground, then climbed out of the tractor. I could hear Bear growl slowly as I went to inspect that corpse. I lowered myself and tried to lift the body. It was still heavy, but I could get it off the ground for a few seconds before giving in. I ended up dropping the body, making it topple to its side so it faced me. I was shocked when I saw it had no snout. I was sure that, of the attack, only the surviving cow had a snout missing, but that one was nowhere to be seen. Upon further inspection, there was a very large slit down the cow's body. I brushed my fingers against it and saw that the slit opened like a purse. I gagged as I saw that there were no organs inside the corpse, only bone and muscle. My first thoughts weren't, why did it have no organs, or what did this? The thing I wanted to know the most was, if this corpse was the snoutless cow, where did the other body go? And why was this one so heavy? I got a sudden chill and stood up to check my surroundings. The atmosphere felt off. Just then, I flinched as I felt a drop of rain fall on my forehead, followed by a few more as the sky began to grow dark and shower the land. I finished burying the last corpse. Then I took Bear inside with me. Whatever work I had for that day could wait till tomorrow. A few hours went by, but the rain did not let up. It was even starting to thunder, which I didn't mind as much. But Bear whined and hid in a corner. His personality compared to earlier was like someone had flipped a light switch in his brain. I fed both of us and was about to find a movie to watch when the power went out. The only source of light I had at the moment was my phone. However, my uncle is prepared for times like this. I took a few candles from his closet and lit a few around the house. After lighting a third candle, I looked at the rain through a window. I couldn't see much but darkness and the occasional flash of lightning. I heard Bear whimper more, and I rubbed his back, letting him know that I'm here before I put a blanket around him. After dinner, I put my plate in the sink, and I thought of going to bed early, since there was nothing else for me to do. As I undressed, I looked through the bedroom window. A flash of lightning showed there was a figure near the cow's fence. I did a double take, but I couldn't see anything for a few seconds, not until the next flash of lightning struck. When it did, the figure was already inside the fence, and that flash caught the moment that it raised its arm and slit a cow's throat. That's the cow killer, I thought, as I ran out of the house. A dumb idea to do during a storm, I know, but if I didn't catch this guy now, then I didn't know when I would. I grabbed the double-barreled shotgun and made my way to where I last saw the figure. The only thing I found was a pool of blood, with a trail leading away from the fence. The herd of cows within the fence mooed in fear as the adults surrounded the young. I followed the trail for a few minutes before I stopped. I heard some sort of noise like something wet and meaty being torn apart. I tried to listen to where the noise was coming from, but as the sound of thunder roared, it stopped. I held my breath. Suddenly, a flash of lightning struck and revealed the figure 20 meters away from us. It was hunched over one of the cows, eating it while it was still alive. Before the light faded, I could barely recognize its appearance. It was a cow with a slitted throat. It began to slowly rise like it knew how to stand up like a person. When the next flash of lightning struck, it threw itself backwards and began to spider walk further away. I gasped and turned around, making a beeline back to the house with only the flashes of lightning to guide my way. I couldn't hear if the thing was following me or not, but I wasn't going to risk looking back. The sound of Bear's barking guided my way to the house as I drew closer. I would leap through the door and slam it shut, locking both locks on the door. Just as I did, my legs finally gave in as I dropped to the floor, clutching the shotgun tightly against my wet, cold chest. I kept repeating, "What was that? What was that?" in my head for the next 2 minutes as I began to hyperventilate. When you see something your brain cannot comprehend, it tries to rationalize what it could logically be by filling in the gaps with what it already knows to try and make it make sense. However, there was nothing about what I just saw that made any sense. Bear's barking was replaced with a low growl as he headed towards me. He watched the door as I slowly calmed down. "It's okay, Bear. It's okay," I said to calm him down. But really, I was just trying to reassure myself. I noticed Bear was slowly moving his head towards the window from the door. Then he got up and began walking along the wall like he was prowling side by side with whatever was outside. He stopped moving then and raised his head quickly to the ceiling. At the same time, I felt the house shake a little with the sound of a large thud coming from the roof. Bear must have lost the thing's position because he spun around trying to see where it was. Things were silent for a few seconds. Even Bear was quiet. There weren't any sounds of footsteps on the roof. Nothing, unless you counted my heartbeat, which was quickening. I decided to get up, trying to hide in a room until this cow monster or whatever it was left. I didn't even take a second step when I heard a voice. "Abby Normal." It sounded like Abby something, I thought. "Abby Normal." It took me a few seconds, but then I realized it. It was a quote from Young Frankenstein, one of the movies I was watching last night. My blood went cold. Had it been right outside the house that night? "Jesus Christ!" It screamed, setting Bear off. He snarled and ran towards the bedroom. "Bear, wait!" I shouted as I followed after him. Bear rammed his head into the door, forcing it open, and he leapt towards the window. I stopped when I saw that the window was open, and a mixture of what looked like hooved fingers reached inside the house. Bright yellow lights appeared in the darkness outside. The eyes of that thing. Bear leapt at the creature, forcing it to retreat as he went out the window with it and chased after it. "Bear, come back!" I shouted as I stuck my head out the window. I couldn't see where Bear was, but I could hear the sound of his barks, and another sound, a laugh. I didn't get any sleep that night. I locked myself in the bathroom and cried. I was so worried about Bear, and so scared of what that thing actually was. I prayed to God that Bear was okay and that he managed to drive off that thing. Morning came when the sound of a rooster crowed. I got dressed, arming myself with a hunting knife, my uncle's double-barreled shotgun, and left the house to search for Bear. I went to the side of the house where the bedroom window would be. I found muddy tracks belonging to Bear and another pair of tracks I assumed belonged to the creature. I followed these tracks for a good 5 miles, occasionally finding drops of blood mixed with mud, making me more concerned that I might not find Bear alive. After another half hour, I found something that I was not expecting. A pile of organs covered in mud and blood. The smell made me gag and tear up, and I was paranoid that they belonged to Bear. I then turned my head to see that there were more tracks. There's still hope, I thought. I followed the tracks for another 15 minutes, finding my way to the cow thing's corpse. I pulled out the hunting knife and stabbed it right in the head. I've seen too many scary movies and didn't want to risk a sneak attack. But sure enough, it seemed to be dead. I couldn't find any more footprints belonging to Bear, so I searched for another hour before I gave up. I couldn't find any more clues leading to Bear's whereabouts. I was so upset, so confused. It's almost like Bear just grew wings and disappeared. I wasn't in the mood to do anything all day. I know I had work to do, but I just couldn't do it. Bear was on my mind. I motivated myself to at least feed the livestock. After that, I just spent the rest of the time doing nothing. When dinner time came, I didn't eat. I made food for Bear just in case the smell attracted him back. As I opened the door, and I practically fell back and dropped the food, right in front of the house was Bear, sitting and staring at me. "Bear!" I shouted as I ran over to hug him. He felt off when I hugged him, though. It felt like I was hugging a bag of dried-up leaves. I pulled away and looked at him. Even his face seemed off. His pupils were so dilated that it almost looked like he had no irises at all. He wasn't panting, and now that I think of it, I don't think he was even breathing. "Bear?" I said. "Dinner's ready. You want to come eat?" As I walked inside, I kept the door open for Bear so he could get in. But he continued to sit there, staring at me, not making any movements at all. "What's wrong, Bear? Aren't you coming in?" I asked. Bear stayed where he was for another minute before coming inside at last. I picked up the food I'd dropped as he made his way towards the bedroom, and I soon followed after. When I entered the bedroom, Bear was sitting in front of the open window where he'd leapt out the night before. I closed it after putting his food bowl in front of him, and I went to make myself dinner. The rest of the night was uneventful. After eating, I went to bed early, but I woke up at 1:25 a.m. I had this feeling like I was being watched. I looked around but didn't see anyone there. The door was open, and I assumed that Bear went to sleep somewhere else. I shut my eyes and lowered myself back into bed so I could get comfy once more. My head hit the pillow, but then I opened my eyes by chance. I screamed. There was Bear on the ceiling. He was positioned like a spider waiting for its prey to get trapped in its web. I could see that his throat had been slit, the same way the cows had their throats slit. I realized then Bear did not kill the cow thing. It had killed him. And whatever had truly controlled that thing now controlled Bear. The bear thing must have seen the look of horror on my face, because it smiled in a way a dog could never smile. Too human. Suddenly, a pair of hands exited Bear's slitted throat as he leapt down from the ceiling. They tried to grab at my throat as Bear's mouth opened wide enough to bite my head. I took my pillow and smacked him with it, knocking him to the side of the bed as I ran out of the room. It wasn't long before Bear regained his footing and crawled along the walls to chase after me. The bear thing began to whine like it was hurt, but there's no way that pillow could have done damage. I tripped on a stack of movies and slammed my face into the wall. The bear thing jumped onto me, grabbing hold of my neck. Its mouth opened wider as the whine grew louder and more painful. I realized it wasn't forming the sound from its mouth. It sounded like it was playing a recording of it gutting Bear alive. It was making me listen to Bear's final moments on repeat. "What are you?" I shouted as I tried to loosen the hand's grip on my neck. The bear thing's mouth had shut around my head, digging its teeth into my head and chin. I was engulfed in the darkness of its mouth. Suddenly, I saw the same bright yellow lights from last night. The eyes were coming from inside the bear thing's mouth. They watched me as I struggled to free myself. I started to cry. I couldn't do anything else. The whining kept going, and it set me off. I rammed my head deeper into the bear thing's mouth, its teeth dragging against my skull, but it had also loosened its grip around my neck. I slammed my uncle's recliner on top of the monster, which gave me time to grab my car keys and run to my car. I had no time to grab my other things, or anything to defend myself with. I slammed the car door shut and locked it before starting the car. I was able to get away, despite a bruised throat and a few scratches. I looked in the rearview mirror to see something other than the bear thing. What I saw was an old naked woman. Her body was covered in a pattern of blood that looked like it was ritualistic. She was also wearing what looked to be a wolfskin over her body, covering her head, back, and arms. My stomach turned as I realized the wolfskin thing she was wearing was not wolf at all. It was bear. She had skinned him and wore him like one of those Laplander animal hats. I was on the verge of a panic attack as I saw the woman get on all fours and slowly move and look more perfectly like my deceased dog. She ran opposite of me then. I lost sight of her after a minute, and just as I did, all my emotions came out. The tears in my eyes blocked my view of the road. I blacked out as I hit a large rock and crashed, nearly throwing myself out of my car. I woke up in a hospital bed. Apparently, my uncle had recovered enough from his surgery and was on his way home when he saw me in my wrecked car. I was asleep for 3 days. The whole time he stayed by my side until I woke up. Of course, he had all sorts of questions he wanted to ask. I thought about my answers carefully. I thought no one would believe my experience at the ranch and about the woman that wore animal skins and became them. So I told my uncle that a wild cougar had attacked me at his home and had killed some of the livestock, and it had gotten my dog Bear. My uncle was saddened from the losses, but was just thankful I was alive. I stayed in the hospital for a few more days, my uncle never leaving my side. He drove me home after I recovered, but that would be the last time I saw him alive. I sit here writing about my experiences a few days after attending Uncle Shag's funeral. His ranch, you see, had caught fire, but I think he had been visited by the woman just like I had, and he had tried to defend himself. My heart is filled with nothing but guilt and regret. I keep thinking that I should have told the truth, even if it would have sounded insane. I mean, would you believe me? I wonder, though, when the woman visited him, did she go as Bear or some other animal whose skin she was wearing? I don't have any idea. I just wish I could see Uncle Shag and Bear to tell them I'm both sorry. Sorry that I didn't tell the whole story to my uncle, and sorry that I couldn't protect Bear. There's nothing more I can say. Just to whoever reads this, if you see a living animal with a slitted throat, run before it's too late. That was a nice change of pace. Some shorter stories to spice things up, and a werewolf in the Ozarks encounter to bat, just to remind me of the terrifying moments in my childhood. Perfect. Good night. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Unexplained Encounters. I've been your host, Darkness Prevails, and you can find me on X at Dark Prevails, on Rumble as Darkness Prevails, or catch more scary stories narrated by me on my other show, Tales from the Break Room, airing every Tuesday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app. Till next time, everyone, stay safe out there and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.